I kind of want to take you to yesterday. Steiny and I, we were going back to the Purdy, Shanahan. We had a fascinating conversation. And Steiny brought up some points along with the listeners about, is Purdy really a third stringer? Was he better than Trey? And I was like, Steiny, okay, that's a question, it's valid. But Ross, talk to me about where his profile goes if he can win a couple games with Purdy in the playoffs. Or lo and behold, get to a Super Bowl. I gotta believe Kyle would get more credit than if he did it with Jimmy.
Well, there's no question. And a couple thoughts on that. So, first of all, I thought it was interesting. Greg Cosell said on Thursday's Ross Tucker football podcast that there's a reason why Brock Purdy was the last pick in the draft. And I think a lot of Niners fans, got all up in arms in that, but it's true. I mean, he started 46 games at Iowa State. Everybody saw plenty of Brock Purdy, but he didn't get drafted until the last pick in the draft because he doesn't have that great of an arm. He's not that big. He's not that fast. All the stuff we all already know. But there's also a reason why the Niners did draft him, because they liked him and they liked things about him. And they liked his experience. They liked his moxie and all that stuff. If he ends up having success in the playoffs, huge feather in the cap of Kyle. It's interesting because watching him, there are times, and I tweeted this at Ross Tucker NFL on Sunday. I was joking around, but there are times he reminds me a little bit of C.J. Mullins or Nick Bessers, Like those guys had some similarities to him where it's not the biggest guys, not the biggest arm, but they play gutsy and they've had their moments in Kyle's offense. CJ Beathard did, Nick Mullins did. The question is is this just a short-lived couple good games like Beathard and Mullins had, or is this more sustainable? That's the question now.
Yeah. Ross Tucker joining us on 95.7 The Game. I want to draw you into a conversation we were having before you came on. The San Francisco Giants, they went after Aaron Judge in free agency, and then there was another guy they didn't get. Anyway, they haven't done well in free agency, and the general manager, Farhan Zaidi, had this quote. He said, and he's talking about San Francisco. I think it's a little bit of a polarizing place among players in terms of desire to play there. It's sort of independent of the competitive situation, but it's geography, politics, whatever. When we're doing our research on free agents and we find the players aren't really that happy even coming into town for a 3-game series, so they're probably not going to be that excited to play here for a long time, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes on to say that's why they target hometown ties. You've played in Dallas, Washington, Buffalo, New England, Cleveland. I know it's not like you were Aaron Judge and had 20 teams to pick from, but how much did that part of it factor in for you decision-wise, the city, where you're going to be playing?
Well, so I never really got to that point, right? I mean, the only team that wanted to sign me after the draft was Washington. Cut by them, claimed on waivers by the Cowboys. Cut by the Cowboys, claimed on waivers by the Bills. Bills cut me. New England signs me during the season. Nobody else wanted it. The only time I was really a free agent was my last year, and it was either Washington or Atlanta. And I really just was going to go to Atlanta because it was a better football situation, even though Washington was a lot closer to home. But Atlanta failed me on my physical, so my only option was Washington. I do think for a lot of guys, city is a factor. Money's always the number one, always. And then the next thing, some guys weigh the city more heavily. Some guys weigh, the organization and the chance for success. And, it's interesting. We never really talked about this. And I'm sure you guys talk about it. I'm not going down any political realm here. I'm not into that. I don't really pay attention enough. But I've got several friends from both high school and college that have left the Bay Area over the last couple of years for whatever reasons whatever it is that you guys have going on out there, they left. They didn't want to be there anymore. So I don't, I think there's probably several factors, and I've talked to them about it. I'm not going to get into it here, but I think that I don't know how many of the athletes would know that though. Like I don't know how many of the athletes that are free agents, but maybe they would. Maybe they talk to people. Maybe people are like, you don't want to live there. My buddy moved out because of X, Y, Z. Or I think that's a really interesting question that the Bay Area kind of has to ask themselves.
Ross, before we let you go, I got to pick your brain. That was good stuff about the MVP. I was a doubter on Hurts, but I'm looking at what he's doing, and I know there's like 4 or 5 games left. And Sunday, I text my producer, Evan, and I said, you know what? I'm done hating. You look at one loss for the Eagles, number 1 seed. He responds, Mahomes. And I thought about the NBA and all the years that Michael Jordan could have got the MVP and they gave it to somebody else. I get it. But I said, you know what? Something special is just going on with this year with Philly and Hurts. If I ask you who's Ross's MVP now, how would you answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is Jalen Hurts. And, the only knock against him really would be that the rest of the team around him is just so good. And so he's not put in as many tough spots as some of these other people are. But he hasn't had a bad game yet. I mean, there's so many statistics. When you look at passer rating and interceptions and all this stuff, he's just had a phenomenal season. And the only reason why he's not the clear-cut MVP is because of the first impressions that people have of him, whether that's at Alabama when he didn't really throw very well, or even last year when he didn't throw very well. And a lot of people have a tough time in life overcoming their first impression about somebody, but he has been unbelievable this year. You guys will say, "Oh, I'm a homer." I'm not. I mean, I did power ranking today on the Raw Sucker Football podcast. I have the Eagles 1. I have the Niners 2. I think the Niners are really good
in the NFC, right?
No, in the league.
Oh,
in the league.
Wow.
I think right now, Philadelphia Eagles are the best team in the NFL. I think San Francisco 49ers are the second best team in the entire NFL.
So you're telling me you think the 49ers are the
Ross.
second best team in the NFL with a third-string quarterback?
Oh, man.
Yes, I do.
Wow.
I think right now, if the 49ers played every team in a 7-game series in my backyard or whatever, neutral site, I think the Niners are the second best team right now. I mean, they've won 6 games in a row for a reason. Now, that said, I don't know how much you guys have watched the Eagles, but, man, this is the best. And they might not win the Super Bowl. Look, they might lose the first playoff game. That happens all the time. But this is the best Philadelphia Eagles football team I've ever seen.
Really?
Wow, man.
Well, first of all, they have the best O-line in the league. They have 2 awesome receivers. They have an awesome tight end who's coming back. Their quarterback's probably the MVP. Their running back has 10 touchdowns, 1,000 yards. They have 4 guys that are going to have double-digit sacks, maybe even 5. I mean, think about that. They lead the NFL in sacks. Their linebackers are good. Their 2 corners are awesome. I mean, they're just real. Everything has come together at the exact right time. It's actually scary how good they are. It's hard to believe they're this good.
Ross, I got to say this, Steiny. Yesterday, Steiny got triggered by this word. It was house money. And I was saying to him, a lot of fans now feel like because it's Brock Purdy, whatever the Niners do, Ross, is house money. But with what you just said, the Eagles being the number 1 seed, the expectations that if they don't get, Ross, I'm going to the Super Bowl after what you just said, Philly would be disappointed, huh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Man.
It would be very disappointing. And what's wild about it is twofold. Number one, they could go 14-3 and be the 5 seed. I mean, if they lose one game,
yeah,
and they lose to the Cowboys in the on
Christmas Eve.
They could be the 5 seed. I mean, the Cowboys could very easily be 14-3 and be the 5 seed if the Eagles only lose to them, which is crazy. You got to win 3 road playoff games. The other thing, and I was talking with somebody about this recently, it's why the NFL is so different from the NBA. It's not a 5-game series. Like, if it were a 5-game series, I would put a lot of money right now on the Eagles to win the Super Bowl. But it's not.
Right.
And it's an oblong ball, and it only takes one game, and turnovers happen. You never know what game they're going to happen, and they could absolutely, have a bad game, and maybe Hurts picks the wrong time to have a bad game. He hasn't had one yet. Maybe he picks the playoffs.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Hey, Ross, good stuff, man. Appreciate it, and we'll catch up with you next week.
Awesome. See you guys.